This is the Content and AI Podcast, episode number 37. The label Generative AI has led many to focus on using this new tech for content creation, while the real benefits may lie in different capabilities that LLMs and other AI tools afford. In his work, Jeff Coyle has enthusiastically adopted AI, using it to identify new content repurposing opportunities, to capture and leverage unique organizational knowledge, and to dramatically reduce the cost of content operations, discovering along the way new opportunities for content professionals.
Welcome to the Content and AI Podcast, where experts on artificial intelligence share their wisdom with the content community. Our mission is to demystify and democratize AI, to make its principles and practices accessible to all content practitioners. And now here's your host, Larry Swanson.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode number 37 of the Content and AI Podcast. I'm really delighted today to welcome to the show Jeff Coyle. Jeff is the co-founder and chief strategy officer at MarketMuse. We talked on my other podcast, Content Strategy Insights, a couple of years ago, and I'm really excited to have him back because one or two things have changed since then. So welcome, Jeff. Tell the folks a little bit more about what you're up to these days.
Oh, thanks, Larry. And yeah, I'm glad to be back. I am the co-founder and chief strategy officer for MarketMuse, as you mentioned. I'm working on building artificial intelligence and content strategy offerings so that teams can make better decisions about what content they create or what content they update, and then execute a lot faster. And so I'm sure we'll get into the details. But my background, I've been in the search space, building products, building search engines, building lead management systems, or selling them for 25 years. And I've been in SEO for about that time, about that long as well. So there's probably nothing in the SEO space that you could ask me about that I haven't, tackled or got knocked over by and got back up and then tackled.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to this discussion. So.
There's so much going on in that world. I really want to stay focused on the AI stuff, but we might have to slip into SEO a little bit because that's an old practice of mine way back in the day.
Sure.
But the first thing I want to do, you mentioned the details, and do want to get into the details. But what I would love to get, because you're somebody who's been in this world for 20 years, and you were talking about LLMs and prompt engineering 6 months before ChatGPT hit the scene. So you're clearly embedded in this world. I would love to get sort of your top level overview of the commercial landscape around like just data and data sourcing and the services around LLMs and GPTs and that whole world. Can you give us just sort of a quick high level overview?
Yeah, like you said, and I've been doing natural language processing and the artificial intelligence components for now, about a decade, thinking about ways that I can do it. I mean, I was trying to figure out how to use the language technology to automatically classify documents, into categories and into taxonomies, literally in a project 10 years ago. And then before that, thinking about search engine indexing and search engine strategies and building vertical search engines, building intranet search engines, and then the implications of how to use that to be really great at building content and being really great at SEO. Right now, we're in a very unique, and the world is moving so fast that I think everyone really, really needs to focus on the new features and components that come with some of these language model releases. We just saw and this, dating this in the late summer in 2024, we saw from recent releases with Llama, some of these things that have been closed and not accessible. Now you can see the way that things are working. Right, that the way that they're open, the weightings and change things that you can tweak. So you're able to learn from what's being released a lot more than you were in the past, and that's amazing just by itself. The advancing models that come out, even if you don't modify them yourself, they're progressing so fast that if you have a process in place that's using natural language processing technology or large language models, every time a new model is releasing, you're talking about savings of factors of 10 minimum. I mean, I have processes that every time something new comes out, I'm able to knock down 90% of the costs. right? So when you're talking about the data side of it, there is massive, massive diamonds built into anyone that has any proprietary data source right now. So inside your business, if you're a mid-market to enterprise, you should be doing a data inventory. What do we have that's special? What do we have that could be used for someone else's benefit based on how fast this market is moving? Whether the use case, if you don't understand the use case, come find somebody like me. Come find somebody like um, Andrew Amon from 923 Studios. Find somebody who is all about knowing how to make use cases with data and turning those things into potential gold mines for your business. So if you have a database of customer data, if you have a database of real estate data, if you have a massive search engine index, right? You can use those things to do magic. And you can do it on the cheap now. And it keeps getting cheaper and cheaper. And that's where I don't think people are catching up right now. They're not catching up to how truly fast and how truly cheap it is to do things that would have cost millions of dollars. And I'm not being hyperbolic there. Millions of dollars only 3 or 4 years ago. And I'm a kid in a candy store with these things, right? I mean, I did a proof of concept that would have cost me about $500,000 just 2 or 3 years ago. And I shocked myself because the total cost of the entire project was like $1. I mean, it was literally $1. And I was like, I'm paying more for the coffee that I'm drinking right now than that cost. And I'm like, well, could we scale this? And I'm like, hey, let's spend $70. And we did. And I'm like, the magnitude of the things that we're doing for the cheap, it's truly staggering. And so I think everybody's really got to think, what makes them special? What data do they have, or what data do they know about? Maybe it's a partner, maybe it's a peer, maybe it's a data provider, and you can turn it into a partnership. As hey, you have this thing, we could really do something special with it. That's the new economy that with artificial intelligence and with content that nobody's talking about.
Yeah, and as you say that, I'm thinking it's probably a rich, multi-sided environment too. Like I'm just picturing, like you just said, like if you have the data and people with the data have, more opportunities, but people with ideas about what to do with that data. There's also
Yeah.
like that sort of the world of like data products, but also just data as a supply for other people's stuff. It just
Mhm.
seems like there's so much going on there. And you mentioned the use case. Are there some classic like off the shelf use cases that really jump out as opportunities for folks?
Well, I think yes, absolutely. So um, so I'm commonly thinking about content, right? Um, More than ever. So the generic mediocre content for your website, for example, is below a commodity. It's almost unusable, right? So if you think that you can just jump to the end with content using an LLM out of the box, right? There's nothing special. Nothing special about it. Prompt engineering can get you at least as high as reasonable, but that output is going to be commoditized. So putting out stuff that isn't great is no longer really an option. Right? So what makes it great? What makes this podcast interesting? It's our expertise. It's what we bring to the table. It's our unique perspectives. So your databases, your data, your expertise, the expertise of the history of people that work there, anyone's inputs that you can bring to the table can all be used along the content strategy and content workflow journey. So the trending vocabulary word in this space is workflow AI, right? I like to call it content strategy or content strategist AI because that's a product I just released, right? But injecting these inputs to the process any way you can becomes your secret weapon. That's the thing that only you can do that no one else can. So, what is that? It could be a big old database. It could be us doing interviews and questions and answers and manipulating that into a knowledge base so that the knowledge base can be used, right? So the development of knowledge bases, and this is why I cringe so hard, LavaCon, Knowledge Graph Conference, and I'm thinking of this from like a content strategy perspective. Like, I want all of your technical documentation. I want those behind the walls documents, those beautiful, you know, boxes and boxes of binders I want all of that because I can turn that into gold, right? Whereas in many enterprises, technical documentation is hidden and not being used for anything. So that's one example that is just obvious. Is get your technology talking to the wealth, the wealth of that. The other one is the knowledge in people's heads that maybe don't write for one reason or another. I'm not a great writer. It's always been a fun, ironic thing. But I like to talk. And when you record me talking for a couple hours, you can turn that into, binders of good stuff typically, right?
Yeah.
So you've got to figure out, how do you extract the uniqueness out of your people? How do you get all of the special stuff that you have? And then how do you do an inventory of databases that someone might find interesting? I mean, I was just having a conversation. I mentioned Andrew Amen. He's one of my favorite people in this space. He was mentioning an example of, you know, uh, a system where, and this to him is like whatever. This is obvious, but he is, a system that predicts when houses are going to go up for sale before they go up for sale. 10 years ago, that was science fiction. Now it's like whatevs. That's easy, right? And so like, and how do you use that? You get demographic data. Who moved in? What is their family profile? How long did they live there? Do they have pets? And all of that information can be grinded into a beautiful mush that allows you to be very, very predictive. Right? So you might not know what somebody can do with your data. You
Yep.
might not know
And
those
even
things,
like
but you go there. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
a couple of the things you just said are like, it seem like really low hanging fruit in this world. Like that notion of like doing some kind of like a very high level content inventory of like all the stuff, all your tech docs, all of your stuff, but also that, so there's that. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, but also that this comes up all the time. Way back in, I think it was episode number 2 of this podcast, I had Paco Nathan on, and he went to pretty much every AI conference in the world in 2023. And he said he identified a bunch of trends, one of which was that being like a huge issue. Then in industries like Japanese commercial fishing to like, steel mining in Pennsylvania or something, or steel manufacturing, that there was this problem of people leaving and they're not in their tacit knowledge, just leaving with them, and a lot of consternation about how to capture that knowledge. So can you talk a little bit about like how to like inventory your knowledge, but also how to capture it from your folks' heads?
Well, I mean, the technology that's related to transcription is a must, right? So conversations and transcription, and then being able to transform transcriptions into other forms that has modernized so fabulously that you can do a lot with it. Some technology that I've recently built that's relates to claims management. So, what claims do we make in this discussion, and how can we use? So, can we turn our conversation into a series of claims that have been made, and then use those as part of archival classification or even assessment? So we can say, hey, how many things that Jeff said today were not editorially defendable? So even getting into a new definition for content quality, right? That's a precursor to fact checking, which is, in my mental roadmap. Someone's got to give me lots of money to build the fact checker, but because it is that last step is a lift. But the those are all things. So the challenge is knowing what to ask, and that tribal knowledge. That's where stuff dies. It dies in the tribal knowledge. It dies in the stories. It dies when people don't think that experience should be part of content process. Point of view. When you don't have a way to inject your point of view into a process, I mean, you can basically take. It's a crazy combinatorics, right? Think about all the ways you can manipulate a content brief, right? have it have a different point of view, style, tone, voice, personal experience, fact statements, linguistic context. Like all these things all have infinite possibilities. So, content brief about one article, you could make, on one topic, you could make billion different versions of it without even flinching. Right? And so, think about this, right? If you don't do that, you're writing that one weird generic article that could have been written on WikiHow, or it could have been written on Livestrong, or any one of those things. So you bringing those things in allows you to be one unique snowflake article that exhibits your blue ocean, your expertise. So the question isn't how do you do this more than just like be inquisitive, figure out what your data sets are, get people who have done these types of data inventories, but it's also about knowing what other people know. So you might have had someone that retired. Hey, I'm sorry, Joe, we really need to talk to you about these experiences. And, being a great journalist is now worth a whole lot of money. Being a great journalist went from being really valuable to misunderstood and underappreciated. Now, guess what? Great editor, a great journalist, the subject matter experts. When a journalist pairs with a subject matter expert, they become the most valuable person in the room again, which is kind of cool. It makes it's so validating for like an editor in chief that wanted that to be the case 15 years ago, but it wasn't because you were fighting over scarce resources for content. They could only write so much. So they were fighting over what we do, right? But then the market commoditized for low quality content. You can create infinite low quality content. Well, who knows what expertise is? Only them. So the question isn't how do you get them? It's you have to find those people. You have to find the experts. People have to become passionate in the room. Let's say you don't have anyone that's actually an expert in your field on your team. You're probably one of the people complaining about your website going down and having no traffic.
Yep. Hey,
Right
as you say
now.
that, there's so much consternation in the content world now about there's really problems. A lot of people are having trouble finding work and all this stuff. But the way you're talking, it's like it seems like there's like these subtle shifts in like how things are perceived and where you go looking for the cool job. Because that notion that like the editor in chief who was like undervalued 5 years ago is all of a sudden a hot commodity. Can you think of analogous things? Like I'm thinking right now, the content design world. There's a lot of people in that world who are really hurting because people think,
Yeah.
oh, I'll just get Chat GPT. But you've also mentioned earlier that like it seems like one of the least valuable things that AI can do is to create content. It's more about
Yeah.
helping you decide which content to create. Can you offer any hope to content people about like kind of new opportunities emerging? More examples of like that editor in chief who's now better valued.
Well, you're sadly it's going through a debasing cycle, and only the real sharps, the really smart rooms, are revaluing those people. And so it's going to take time for those people, the smartest people in the room, to, in this case, that most the highest experts, to be put into those valuable states again. So what I have recommended for teams is to illustrate the value of what is sometimes being called workflow AI or content strategy AI. Exhibit that and say, hey, guess what, folks? You might believe that content is a commodity right now. Let's talk through that, right? We need to figure out and illustrate that it's not, right? And you need to show through the actions that having a human in the loop, having an expert in the loop, yields higher performant content. Because in the end, the same people who are devaluing content are actually devaluing things they think are non-performant. If they could align it with KPIs effectively and content performance, they wouldn't devalue it, right? But because they can't connect A to money, in one reason or another, they're devaluing it. They might devalue omni-channel in certain ways too. So all your channels need to be directly connectable to value, either direct attribution or appropriate explanation of attribution. I mean, if you're in a business where you're being devalued because of that, maybe they have first click attribution or last click. By the way, both stink. My favorite analogy for first and last click attribution is Larry and I are going to the bar. We started the night off with a bottle of champagne. We then had 6 glasses of wine. And at the end, they had a beer that I haven't tried. So I had one of those before we went to bed. And I woke up with a terrible hangover. Last click attribution, I blame the beer. Last click attribution, I blame the beer. First click attribution, I blame the champagne. There was a whole picture there,
What
right?
was the 6 glasses of wine in between?
6 glasses of wine in the middle that probably got me there, right?
Yeah. No, you said,
And so
yeah.
yeah. So
You're taking me back to
those are the
my,
things
yeah.
you got to get to.
Yeah, no, you're taking me back to my affiliate marketing experiments 15, 20 years ago. And yeah, the attribution stuff, nothing has changed about that. But hey, I want to revisit a couple things you just said, because I want to, first of all, just that that notion of tying like content to business value or to KPIs, specifically is what you said. But
Right.
that's a thing that just comes up all the time. It's like, I think content people need to be more cognizant of the business impact of their work and aware of it and always thinking about
Right.
that. But the other thing you mentioned omnichannel. You also mentioned earlier, like the kind of looking across the terrain at all the content you have. So that, to me, that's kind of the two ends of the content spectrum, is like all the stuff you have in your org and all the stuff your customers need in those multi-channel, omnichannel destinations. And you're always looking at that like through an SEO lens, but it also seems to me that, like, if you go up a level, you could look down from any departmental level and go like, what's the benefit to me of understanding what all I've got in the organization? Do you ever work with folks on that kind of stuff, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, it's the it's the it's the lack of focus on how you wish people would consume content versus how they are consuming content, right? And then it's how they could be. And so, I mean, a great example of this is in the fields, some of the fields we've been talking about, is from a technical documentation perspective, right? What is a customer's exposure to that? Should any customer, before they buy, have access to those things? How would they go about getting those things, right? And it would be really, really hard for them to get it. But should they? Doesn't the fact that that exists and that post-purchase troubleshooting or post-purchase interactions, isn't if that were properly merchandised or positioned, wouldn't that help the buyer journey, right? Those types of questions become, required, is the way I'm saying. And now you think about this, right? Like, what if you could predict the questions that, if you surfaced them in the consideration phase of the funnel, that were actually only sourceable in post-sale docs? If you can use these models to predict, oh wow, when someone's in the middle of the funnel, there's stuff over here in the post-sale docs that if they were to see, it would actually increase their confidence in our business and they will buy more. That's when everybody's brains break. Like, wait, what?
Yeah. No, that's it. And you're echoing
Yeah.
again, more echoing here. But I've heard like Scott Abel and Jack Molisani and Sarah O'Keefe and folks from the technical content world talking about, like, to the extent that people do find it and they look at it, because that's like marketing material now, apropos of what you were just saying.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's really.
But it's not just what they're looking for and want.
Mhm.
It's possible now for all of us to do proper attribution and not just do cheapo attribution, right? It's possible for us. It's not perfect yet, but it's every time someone looks at anything or consumes it, that's part of their dossier effectively. And then they belong to a buying group, right? They belong to a team, right? So it's possible to do human level, profiling, and it's possible to do the team and the business, right? All these things are possible. It's just that software hasn't caught up. That accumulated dossier, buying team, tech, because they've historically taken a lot of cheap shortcuts because people don't really understand how valuable it is. But once you get to that point, that's when it's really, really hard for your CMO or your CEO to devalue that content. And what I've always said also is if something's far away from the money, you're going to have to look for automation, right? And so if in your organization content's really far away from money, it's not crazy for someone to want to automate it. Same thing will go for social, right? It seems really easy to just automate your social campaigns, right? It probably seems easy because it's far away from the money. And that's, it probably shouldn't be considered, but that's just maybe the internal perception. So the
Interesting.
further something
You mean
farther
far
away from the
away in
money,
that same sense of attribution, like that notion of like that people don't see its contribution to the
right?
bottom line or the gotcha. Yeah,
They're
absolutely.
not able to holistically understand that all of these channels are contributing to this outcome. I mean, one example of this, and this is the one that happens all the time. So people are going to shake their head violently if they've been in the situation where it's like, well, um, your content strategy or your social, if we have visits that are coming straight into our homepage, we're not counting that for those campaigns, right? It's like, oh, those are just brand recognition. That's coming from other channels. It's like, what? No, no, it's all one
Yeah.
mosaic. It's because you can't directly track it because
You-
it's a mush together of things. But how many times I've unraveled that and I see that this user landed on a landing page, and then 3 days later came in through the front door and registered. And if I hadn't said anything, you would have tracked that to brand. Oh man, that's so or to paid even. Maybe they typed in the name of your company and clicked on the name of the ad, and they're like, oh, that's a PPC lead. No, it's not, right? It's your marketing team's lead, and your marketing team
yeah.
needs to work together. It's
Well,
not one. It's not a
we hit
single
on this in
attribution.
our earlier
Yeah,
conversation about the getting more sophisticated about metrics and tracking and all that
sure.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
are there new opportunities? You've mentioned like cost plummeting on all these kinds of services and data sources.
Yeah.
Are there opportunities in that dynamic to better track and to it sounds like your ability to flesh out and properly
Yeah.
account for attribution is better now.
It's lagging, but what it's lagging it's lagging AI, but there are ways of doing it with artificial intelligence now that allow you to build much more predictive models quicker. So that's the key. And if you have enough data, let's say your CRM, for example, you can build some really great automated models. So if you aren't doing anything with your CRM data, right, to build predictive models for things like churn prediction, predictive lead scoring, um, uh, things like that, right? Anything related to those things, um, personalization on your website. If you're not doing that, you can get there very, very simply and cheaply right now.
Mhm.
So those are your top. Those would be my top. So thinking about if I'm an e-commerce shop or if I sell something, is my buying data being used to build predictive models? If I'm a B2B tech, is my CRM being used for predictive modeling? If I have a customer success software product, is that being used? If I'm a publisher, my revenue system, so the one that manages my ads, my affiliate, is that data being used for predictive modeling? If I'm not doing those things, well, I'm a couple of years behind, so uh, I need to step up. I don't build those things, so I'm saying this just agnostically.
Mhm.
But you can absolutely solve those problems for what used to cost $1 million. You can solve those for 50,000, 12,000. Yeah, and these used to be $1 million AI systems, and you can build them on the cheap.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing it happen all the time.
Yeah.
And who's going to be the one to build a super duper software system that does all these things? I have no idea. But yeah, you can talk to an AI shop who rocks, and they will. they will tell you all these use cases and help and tell you how much it's going to cost you if you want them to do it for you, or you can actually, drive the train internally and do it, much cheaper than you expect.
Interesting. That's a whole other
Yeah.
conversation, the buy
Yeah.
versus build thing. But
Right.
hey, Jeff, I can't believe it. We're coming up close to time already. But before we wrap, is there anything you'd like to revisit from the conversation, or just make sure you share before we wrap?
Well, one thing I'll mention is that if you're thinking about this from a content perspective, a content strategy, content marketing perspective, my first step for you is do a process inventory. Larry mentioned a content inventory. Yeah, that's important, but also a process inventory. Sometimes we forget how much manual effort's being done, and go through everyone who thinks. Even time sitting down thinking is manual effort. Sometimes people don't think that thought is actually time spent thinking, time spent doing notes. Anything you're doing manually, get it on paper, get it documented one time, get it all there, full amnesty. Any software that's being used, anything that is being crutched, right? Maybe it's being crutched with ChatGPT. That's okay, cool. Get it all on paper, and that's how you start. That's how you start this process. You really need to know how much time and energy is actually going into it. And don't forget updates. Don't forget copy editing. Don't forget developmental editing. Whatever that entire life cycle includes. Don't forget you clicking around in Google Analytics, right? Everything. Put it all in there. Get it documented. Then you'll be able to grow. It's not about how many words the LLM can spit out. It's optimizing everything else and ensuring that it's differentiated and special. And once you get through the process inventory, then you can say, ooh, how do we inject our expertise? And then we can start putting points on the board. Don't jump to the end. Don't jump to the draft. That's my takeaway.
Yeah, that seems like great advice. And it seems like it's also kind of scalable, that at any one level of your content operation, you could look at that and do that same inventory you just described. That's awesome. Thanks, Jeff.
Absolutely. No matter where you are, do it. And it will change everything for you. And just be tough on yourself. And if any part of that story involves mediocre content or a resource that's writing crap, guess what? I'm really, really sorry. They're out of here. Their resources writing crap. They better be real cheap, and I'm talking pennies. And I don't know somebody who's writing for pennies right now. If they are, okay, we'll go with it.
Well, I love that one of the outcomes of this is like better content. That's all we ever wanted in this world. So, hey, one very
That was
last
always
thing.
that was our tagline. It was us ridding the world of bad content. Then we realized that was negative, and then we switched it to setting the standard for content quality. And now I'm trying to get into setting the standard for content performance. So we'll go there later. But yeah, you can get in touch with me, Jeff at marketmuse.com, Jeffrey_Coyle on Twitter X, and I'm on LinkedIn. I do answer everything. I give you my cell phone. I love this stuff. Larry, you know that. I would answer it all. So Jeff at marketmuse.com if you got any questions. MarketMuse, content strategy, AI, everything I talked about for injecting your expertise into cluster analysis, content plans, the best briefs you've ever seen. I will build you a brief for free if you email me, and it will be the most amazing brief you've ever seen. So take me up on that. Please, please, please. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for your enthusiasm, your generosity. This is just awesome. Thanks so much.
You got it, Larry. See you.
For show notes and to sign up for our newsletter, visit our website at contentandai.com. And please rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks for listening.